I had respiratory problems all my life. I've never been without. I've had asthma. And as I got older, it got worse. Things began to be taken away from me physically that I wasn't even aware of. I always had trouble going up steps. I always had trouble. As a kid, I couldn't run or play football or baseball with the rest of the kids. But I just, things were taken away. And I noticed that I couldn't walk up steps as well as I could anymore. And I would walk to the garage and I was winded. And the garage for my house is 20, 30 feet. Little things began to catch my attention. The last 2 years at work, I worked behind a computer. I did research and writing. So, it wasn't like I was doing a lot of physical things, but I found myself sitting there. I'd have to go to the bathroom. And I wouldn't go because I was just too much to walk to the bathroom, which was 20, 30 feet down the hall. So I just hold it until I couldn't stand the pain anymore. I'd have to stop walking, simple short distances, a few feet to catch my breath so I could go on. I'd walk into a store, from my car without oxygen. I'd walk from my car to a store, and I'd begin to look around at things, as if I was looking to buy something, just so I could catch my breath. I didn't want anybody to see me leaning over, gasping for air. Once in a while, they'd give me in desperation every couple of months. Matter of fact, towards the end, when I was really bad, I was getting one every other month. They'd put a PICC line, an IV in my arm, and run it almost up into my heart. And then they would give me antibiotics, IV antibiotics, to take it home. And I guess what bothered me about this whole thing was we were all playing a little game. I would tell the doctors that none of this worked, and they would give it to me anyway. And it was like a little game we played, so I'd let them put the PICC in my arm, and I'd go home, and I'd get up I'd have one at 8 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, another at 4 in the morning, or whenever the 8-hour shifts. And I'd sit there so often and say, what am I doing this for? This is the life I lived. I'd wake up in the morning, and I'd say, not another day of this, another whole day of not being able to breathe. I'm on oxygen 24 hours a day now. A lot of days I just said, the heck with it. I didn't get dressed. I just sat there in the recliner and sucked on oxygen all day. I was dying. And I think that my doctors and I played that game too, where we just didn't talk about it. But I was dying. And they just kept treating me. I have a wonderful pulmonologist. Probably one of the most compassionate human beings I've ever met, and truly concerned about all his patients, not just me. But I know that he was doing his best. But I'd run the string out. There was nothing left. When my COPD was out of control, I'd sit there with oxygen on all the time. Half the time in my pajamas. I wouldn't change. I'll give you an idea how bad I looked. My sister, who was probably my closest family member, my younger sister, came to see me one day. And she walked in and she looked at me and she started to cry. And I said, what's wrong? She said, you look terrible. Are you going to die? And of course I felt like I was going to die. I couldn't, there was so much gunk. I don't want to fail to mention this. There was so much gunk in my chest that it used to coat my vocal cords. So I couldn't talk. I couldn't talk on the phone. I couldn't talk in person. People would call me, my friends, my family, how you doing? I wouldn't answer the phone. I could see the number on the caller ID, and I said, why? I can't talk. I couldn't do anything. I was about as close to being dead as I can think of without actually being dead. But everything changed with the BX protocol. The BX protocol saved my life. I just want to say to you tonight, you're going to get a lot of good information. It'll be helpful. It'll be beneficial. It may change your life like it changed mine, and it's going to give you some hope. And in my COPD battle, hope was the first casualty I had. I didn't have any more hope. But through this medicine, Dr. Tenpenny, my wife, I'm alive today. Not only alive, but I'm thriving. So, all I need is my wife and a dog, and I'll run for office. What is the BX protocol? I don't have the faintest idea, but it does great stuff. Dr. Tenpenny is going to tell you all about what it is, how it works, and the science behind it.
Well, Dan, like he said, he's been a patient of ours in our office since, well, our first office was in Strongsville in 1996. And I think it was about 96 or 97 that Dan started coming to see us for allergies, because with his COPD, as you can imagine, it's a lung problem. So when you've got allergies to all kinds of things, foods and environmental things and pollens, not only does it, when you're clogged up here, it makes it harder to breathe. So he'd been seeing us for allergies, and we've been doing things with nutrition and vitamins and supplements and, maintaining pretty well as he was continuing to go downstream. And I think that that's what happens a lot of times. I mean, we weren't really doing anything for his COPD, and sometimes when it's really chronic conditions, we kind of say, well, here's your chronic condition. This is your COPD. This is your MS. This is your, really bad heart disease. We can't do a lot of things for this, but let's clean up the terrain all the way around it, and let's make the rest of you as healthy as we possibly can, because there's not a lot that we have to offer in our toolbox for the COPD. And so that's what we've been doing, kind of along the path. And when Dan came in, Sandy and I will both get all teared up over this, because when he came in, and this was July of last year, we all kind of knew, and Sandy hadn't seen him in a while. And I think when you came in, most of the time he saw Sandy, and they had this really great relationship. They'd known each other for a long time. And I was sitting in my office, and she came in with tears in her eyes and said, do you think this BX program can help Dan? He's really not doing well. And none of us really kind of thought that Dan would make it through Christmas. And this was in July. And I said, well, I know that when they're using it for other things, that the lung conditions are getting better. And there was one little girl in particular that you would see in the testimonials. She's 4 years old. No, I'm sorry, she's 2 years old. And she had acute lymphocytic leukemia. She was treated with leukemia through all the conventional routes, and it destroyed 70% of her lung volume, to where she was on a lung transplant list at 2 years of age. Couldn't walk, couldn't breathe, was getting worse. Her mother had heard about the BX protocol and said, what have we got to lose? Well, if it doesn't work at all, we're going to be out of some time and money. So they started using the BX protocol on her, and moms noticed that she didn't want to be held as much anymore, and that she was more lively and playing more. And one thing led to another, and long story short, she got so much better, they eventually took her back and had another CAT scan done on her lungs, and it was 80% of that lung tissue that had been restored. And she was taken off of a lung transplant list. And so that, plus some other anecdotal stories that I'd known when they were using the BX for other things, I said, well, I don't have any hard evidence, but that's the evidence that we got. So Sandy went back to Dan, and Dan said, all I'm going to be out of some time and money. It's my last hurrah. Either this is going to work or it's not. Let's go for it. So what is the BX protocol in the big picture? I just want to give you just a little tiny overview of the science, because it's very complicated in terms of the scientific stuff. It's been around for about 20 years. Dr. Dwayne Smith, who developed the program, he's a PhD, and has a couple of PhDs. One is in biophysics and bioresonance, and he's just a real brainiac kind of guy. I mean, he really is a real brainiac kind of guy. And it's based off of a premise that a lot of underlying conditions start from an unusual type of infection. And, what we have is, I don't know how I can turn this so you guys can both see. You may have to, can you guys see on both sides from here if I do that, the corners? Pretty good? Well enough? Okay. So when you have an infection, you have a bacteria. Bacteria, of any kind of bacteria, has a cell wall. And when you take an antibiotic, how the antibiotic works is it attaches to the cell walls on the outside of the bacteria and kills it by lysing it. It kind of explodes it. That's how an antibiotic works. Well, under a lot of pressure of a lot of different antibiotics that we're exposed to all the time, and if you have chronic infections, you're always on one antibiotic or another, right? One after another. And then there's antibiotics in the feed that they're giving it to animal husbandry now. There's antibiotics in a lot of places, and a lot of mercury. We get exposed to environmental toxins. After a while, these little bacteria, they're living creatures. So they figure out that the way to survive these antibiotics is to shed this cell wall and become what's called a cell wall deficient bacteria. And they've been around since they've been studying this. In fact, there are over 1,400 research articles that are published through the NIH at the Research Institute, at the National Institute of Health, about these cell wall deficient bacteria. Because they've been around since the 40s. They've been studying them pretty closely, and there was a gal at one time that was doing her research at the Lister Institute. And so because of that, they had given these the name of an L form because of the Lister Institute. And at about the same time as they were studying these L forms and trying to figure out what kind of diseases they caused and what kind of problems they caused, there's another kind of bacteria around that's got little spiky balls on it. They call it mycoplasma. And for about 25 years or so, there was a lot of research that went back and forth between, are these the same critters? Is an L form really a mycoplasma? Are they the same? And at the end of the day, they decided they were completely different species, but they had similar characteristics. For example, mycoplasma can be treated with tetracycline, which is an antibiotic. The L forms can't. These are completely intracellular. These can niggle and wiggle everywhere. When I kind of think about an L form and how I think about it in bacteriology, remember when we were kids and used to blow bubbles? You know, and you used to blow a long wiggly bubble and it would float around out there in space. That's how I think that these L form bacteria and how they work. So how they cause infection and how they cause a problem is that inside of your cells, there's a little tiny organ in every one of our cells. It's an organelle, which means little organ, that's called a mitochondria. And these little things in every single one of our cells, and some organ systems in your body have a much higher concentration of mitochondria than others. Like your lungs have a very high concentration. Your heart has a very high concentration. Your muscles that make you run do. And so inside of there, and what the function of the mitochondria is to make something called ATP. And ATP is basically your body's energy molecule. In fact, if the difference between me standing up here talking to you and a dead person laying on the floor, the dead person on the floor ain't got no ATP. And that's really true. They are no longer manufacturing the chemical that causes everything in your body to move. So what these cell wall deficient bacteria do is they're these little niggly things that they come in and they infect the inside of these mitochondria. And when the mitochondria gets infected by these cell wall deficient bacteria, they cannot be treated with antibiotics. And that's why as the infection gets worse and the number of these things get more because they shed their cell wall to avoid the antibiotics, what ends up happening is you stop the production of ATP. And that's where you get so winded and so tired and it's so hard to breathe and it's so hard to do all of these things because you don't have the life chemistry to make your body work. As this also goes down, the other thing that goes up is something that's called reactive oxygen species. And just think of that as little particles that go around and cause damage to all of your cells. All of your cells. In fact, if you take vitamins that are antioxidants, you know, like vitamin C and vitamin E, well, what they function to do is to suck up these reactive oxygen species that are going around causing damage to your cells. So as these go up, there's more and more damage, and the damage occurs in your whole system, but where it occurs the most likely is in your weakest link. And everybody has a different weak link, right? That's why some people get lung cancer, and some people get stomach cancer, and some people get brain cancer because they have different weak links. And so I always kind of think about it as if you took every organ system and they were like a link in a chain, and you linked, like there's your lungs, your heart, your kidneys, your brain, your organs, and all these things. You put it together and then you snapped it. The one that breaks is your weakest link. And then that's the one that's going to end up being susceptible to the most damage. Some of that has to do with your genes, some of it with your diet, environmental, but this is what happens with these reactive oxygen species. So as we're used to thinking about these things here, and how we are taught to think in medicine, not only as doctors, but specifically as patients, is we tend to think in these silos, right? So I'm gonna erase this here. We think in silos. So we think about cancer, every different kind of cancer that you can think of, right? Breast cancer, prostate cancer, uterine cancer, stomach cancer, lung cancer. So you got all these different kinds of cancers, and then out of that, you've got all these different kinds of treatments. So you think about them as separate things. You don't think about stomach cancer in any way, shape, or form being connected to, say, lung cancer. Then you've got this other whole category that I call non-cancer. And that's every other thing that you can think of. Migraines, autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, COPD, bronchiectasis, emphysema, all of those things, they're non-cancer, right? But again, we think about them as individual things. If you have a lung problem, you're not going to go to the stomach doctor, right? You're going to go to the lung doctor. If you have kidney problems, you're probably not going to go to the neurologist. You're going to go to the kidney doctor. So we think about all these things as different with all of these different types of treatments. Well, what the BX protocol does with that mitochondria is and over here, we'll just call this one other. And these are like weird things, like Lyme's disease, Sjogren's syndrome, other types of autoimmune things that, really have an underlying inflammation as their cause, but they're really not a disease or a cancer. But how this works is that your mitochondria are all of these things. So instead of thinking about that, that is why with the BX protocol, when they use, and which I'm going to explain to you just a minute what the medicine is, why, if you take it for cancer, it helps your lungs. Why, if you take it for your lungs, it's going to help your autoimmune diseases. Why, if you take it for Lyme's disease and you happen to also have a cancer, why that gets better. If you take it for Lyme's disease and you also have COPD, why it gets better. Because it works horizontally across all of these conditions instead of just in an individual silo. That's why some people have said, well, I don't have cancer, I don't have non-cancer, and I don't have any of those weird things. Can I do this to keep me from getting all that stuff? And the answer is yes, of course you can. Because if you can do things to improve your mitochondrial health overall, just think about how every organ system is going to be beneficial to that. So what the BX actually is, what the BX medication actually is they take a mineral, and I think it's rubidium, it's a trace mineral, and they hook up all these very tight oxygen bonds to it, okay? And they take one of those little cell wall deficient organisms that I had drawn over here, and they bind it to this. This is a cell wall deficient organism, and they put that whole thing together under 5,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. So it becomes like a guided missile. It's like a really tightly wound spring that goes into those inside of the cell, into the mitochondria, and seeks out those little infectants, pathogens. It goes in there and kills them. Lyses them, makes them kind of explode because it's got a little oxygen bomb in there. Now what happens as soon as that mitochondria starts getting better? What does it do? What's the first thing it does? Makes more ATP, absolutely. A budding doctor in here. That's great. So the first thing that happens, exactly right, is you get more ATP, more energy. You feel better. Your muscles start to work better. Your heart starts to work better. Your blood pressure gets better. You don't have to, the little mitochondria that are in all of your rib muscles that make you breathe start getting better, so you don't have to work so hard to breathe. And as that happens, you also get a decrease in the reactive oxygen species. And the other thing that happens from this is that your body's own stem cells come alive and go into your weakest link and start to repair the tissue damage to unwind it. And it starts to unwind it at the level of your DNA. Because one of the things that they've found out is that if you take your cell and you look at normal DNA inside the cell, which is how your cells run, right? That's command central for every cell. It gives orders to digest, absorb, eliminate, do this, do that. That's what that does. As a cell gets sicker, the DNA unwinds. And the more that unwinds, and then this replicates over and over and over again, you end up with lots of sick cells. That's what cancer is. So when you go in and you take this little bomb that they've created and you go inside of the mitochondria and you start killing all those little beasties in there, they've actually shown, and Dr. Smith was working with a research department in New York City, and they've actually watched this under electron microscopy over a 90-day period of time, that this starts to return to this. It starts to go back to a normal-looking DNA. And then as that is what heals your cells and makes things start to unwind and get better. This solution, when they started this is actually what the BX solution is. This is what the medicine is. When we started this process a year ago, it was an injection. It was a shot. It was a once-a-week shot. You can give yourself, if you have a nurse, a neighbor, a friend, somebody in your family that can administer shots, maybe somebody that's a diabetic that's used to giving injections. You could give the injection at home. It's not a big deal. They have evolved the process now and have found through the research institute that they have that there is an oral solution, and the oral solution works equally as well as the injection. So now it's a sublingual spray instead of a shot, which is always more appealing to everybody. First of all, nobody likes shots, and second of all, you don't have all that waste to dispose of, needles, and you don't have to worry about all that other stuff. So, does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah.
I understand your whole process that you explained.
Uh-huh.
Do they have actual evidence of every step of what you've spoken?
They do.
Because that's the key. Now, have they found that it has not worked?
Yes. It doesn't work for everybody. Neither does anything in conventional medicine.
Do they know why?
Part of it is in this solid tumor area over here. Some of it is they have not been able to quite, this is Dr. Smith's explanation to me, to make this oxygen bomb quite strong enough to get into the deepest parts of the solid tumors. It gets around the edges of it and breaks it down. Now they've added some colloidal solutions and they're adding different things all the time. There's a relatively strict diet that goes along with it to alkalinize your body. So there's that's always evolving all the time.
Okay, now as far as everybody here is here on the COPD.
Right.
What are you seeing as far as from my understanding, I don't know a lot about COPD.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a lot of different things.
It's
caused by a lot of different things.
It's all lung disease though, right? And if you think about it cutting across this way, whether it's COPD, bronchiectasis, emphysema, those asthma, those things, it's all about because you're thinking tubular, emphysema, COPD, like this. And what we're talking about is it crosses this way because it's affecting all of those types of pathologies at a cellular level that's never been addressed before.
Okay, I've got one more question. You
Okay.
said that when it came to the cancer, that it would have difficulty because, let's say, the thickness of the wall. Are you finding a greater success rate with this protocol for COPD? Because obviously cancer appears to be one type of illness.
Yes.
COPD is something wrong with the cells in the lungs.
Right.
And is there a better success rate in dealing with that than?
There's a better success rate. See, when I first started working with Delta, their whole thing was about cancer. And when I was first introduced to this 2 years ago, I said, interesting, but I don't treat a lot of cancer patients for lots of reasons. I just don't. I think it's complicated, and if you're going to be really good at it, that has to be your specialty. It can't be, even in integrative oncology, you know, it has to be what you do all the time and understand a lot of things, and that's not what I do. And so I don't really treat, so I really wasn't interested. And then when they came back and said, well, it's, you know, this is our main place that we started, but as we're treating cancer, we're seeing all these lateral motions of things, like somebody that has lung cancer but also has Alzheimer's, and their Alzheimer's is getting better. We're seeing somebody that has stomach cancer and they're all these other things laterally. So I said, now that gets my interest, because I want to know what it is, why this cuts horizontally across here. So with asthma, allergies, COPD, all of those sorts of things of lung diseases, a lot of the data that they've collected in the last 3 years is really kind of like an oh, by the way. Oh, we're treating your stomach cancer, and yes, you were a smoker and you had emphysema, and that's better too. Great, but their data is really focusing on treating the stomach cancer. Does that make sense?
So in other words, what you're saying is the data that you're receiving from what this is doing for people is coming from areas that aren't focused on COPD. This just happens to be something that they're finding out that it's helping people with other issues.
Exactly, because of the mechanism of action. Okay, so they've done a lot of things. So they've done a big push on like Lyme's disease, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, right? What do we have in conventional medicine for that? Big fat nothing. I mean, nothing, no thing. You know, here's your antidepressant and here's something for your pain. Well, the Lyme's disease patients that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars all around the world trying to get better are within 3 to 6 to 8 months, they're back functioning in life. There's a big bunch of videos that they've put together about that. And, oh yeah, oh by the way, I had Lyme's disease and I also had asthma, and that's gone. You know, or they have a big thing with diabetes. They have a big sector of treating non-insulin dependent diabetes, not type 1, but type 2. Type 1 is when you are on insulin from the time you're very small. Anecdotally, that has helped, but not a lot. But with the non-insulin dependent diabetic, that as people get older and their pancreas doesn't work very well, they develop diabetes down the road, and then maybe they start on pills and then they need to go to insulin. That stuff has been going away in 6 months or less. So, but they may have been treating somebody for stomach cancer who also had diabetes, and like, look at what's happening to this diabetes. So now they've got this diabetes program, because that's just dropping things away really quickly. And the reason is, and what I really want the drive home message is, because these are great questions, because the drive home message is because of the mechanism of action. We are so trained in medicine. We go to medical school, we become a specialist, right? We become a specialist in heart or lungs or left retinas or, you know, something, you know, so it's super subspecialist now. I don't treat the right one, but the left one, you know, it becomes is how subspecialty is being. Well, this is like going either down to upstream from everything and saying, if you get this mitochondria healthier, if you eliminate these reactive oxygen species, if you start to drag in the body's own stem cells that can go to whatever's sick, and start to make it better. This is where I believe the key to the future of healthcare and medicine is going. Even with the mitochondrial disorder people who are still trying to find a drug to treat it, this is going in like with a Roto-Rooter and cleaning it out and making it work better. Does that make sense? One more question.
What causes Lyme disease?
Lyme disease is this. It's this infectant that they think it's the mycoplasma that has very similar characteristics of what the cell wall deficient bacteria is, that goes in and infects these mitochondria and drives the ATP down, so you have no energy and you can't metabolize different things, so you just feel terrible. You just feel bad all the time.
Tick bite, it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
You want to know what Lyme disease, what causes it, a tick bite?
Well, they say that the tick is infected with a Borrelia bacteria. And it's the Borrelia bacteria that degrades and does all of that stuff. But there's now evidence that Lyme disease can come from getting exposed to a pathogen other than through a tick bite. That's another whole, I don't want to go there, okay? Because we want to stay over here where we are, okay? Yeah, quickly.
When you have someone, I have a rare lung disease, I don't have COPD, but when you're on a medication that's a first ever treatment and it's keeping you stable, but not improving, we don't know how long, how do you treat someone with this protocol? Do you have them go off their medication?
No.
Or stay on
No,
their
you
medication?
never go off, you can never eliminate a drug until you restore health. Like with Dan, I mean, which I wanted him to get back and tell where he is from this point, you know, I mean, he was on the program for, well, several months
Yep.
before he started eliminating inhalers. We eliminated one at a time, and then before he started eliminating some of his blood pressure medicines, we did those one at a time. He was on one for prostate, we eliminated that, and then he was been on high doses of prednisone his whole life. And we got down to about 1 and had a little bit of a flare-up of joint pain and stuff, so we went back to 5, and I said, you know what, Dan, if you gotta be on 5 milligrams of prednisone the rest of your life, and that's all you're on and you feel this good, so be it, right? But as time goes on and he gets better, and his adrenals recover from being shut down on those steroids and everything for so long, and his adrenals start to make their own cortisol again, which they haven't made in a long time, it will really make that will be part of the process of where that will get better.
So are you collecting data for?
We're not, they are.
They'll have a strict protocol to record everything?
Yes, part of what the process is, you're kind of getting ahead of my thunder here a little bit.
Okay.
But part of it is there's a part of being a member of the Delta Institute, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, is the fact that your responsibility is to go into your back office every day and log your symptoms. So you either have to be computer literate or have somebody who's willing to do it for you. And it literally takes, and I'm not exaggerating, once you get it set up, it's less than 10 minutes of your life every day to go back in there. There's conference calls 2 nights a week that people call in from all over the world, and I'll let Dan talk about that a little bit more, because he has firsthand experience. Does anybody have any more questions specifically about this? Just about what we talked about how this works? So we'll have some time.
How do they fabricate that molecule?
That's their proprietary information, that they put it together with this high oxygen under 5,000 pounds per square inch of pressure and create it, so if you think about it like a really tightly wound laser guided spring, okay, so that is really going to just specific types of things. That's what they've worked on for the last 20 years or so. Yes, you're bursting here, what?
No, I think, and maybe I'm also jumping ahead for you. Is this actually a chemotherapy agent?
No,
Okay.
no, it's a high, it's a high, they call it a biophoton, high energy, high oxygen bond resonant molecule. Now say that 3 times fast, right?
Isn't that plant-based?
It's actually rubidium based. It comes from, there's a little piece of mineral in the middle of it. So it's not an herb, it's not a spice, it's not a chemotherapy drug, it's not a pharmaceutical.
Comes from nature.
It comes from nature, and it is all about these oxygen bonds. It's all about how, and that's why when Dr. Smith has done a lot of work with people in China, and there's there's like 26 oncology hospitals in China that are using this in 3 different silos, either the BX alone, the BX plus conventional therapy, or conventional therapy first, and then sending in the BX as the cleanup crew. So, and they're collecting the data on some of that. And so part of what they're doing with that is that he's not concerned about working with people in China because he said they cannot reverse engineer it. Because if they try to reverse engineer it, the whole thing will break apart, there's nothing there. So that's, their proprietary thing. Yeah, Brian?
I was going to say this, so I work at the Delta Institute, so I've learned a lot about this. Those silos, this cuts across about 40 different conditions. So when they say it cuts across, it really cuts across.
Well,
And you can read more about that on their website.
part of my question was too, as a fibromyalgia patient, you mentioned fibromyalgia. Are they also finding that it helps fibromyalgia?
Why? Why? You know the answer. Why?
Mitochondria.
Exactly. I'm doing a good job. Okay, so I'm just going to leave this up. Yes, Michael.
See, you said it's a whole protocol. You mentioned that you alkalinized the
We'll
blood
get back
and
to
you-
that. We'll get back to that.
Nutritionally and things, and so I guess I was just wondering what else was involved in the whole protocol.
We'll get back to that. Okay, but right now I just wanted to kind of go through this because people say, well, what is it? And this is a really good question or comment about what she said. Is it plant-based? No. Is it animal-based? No. Is it plastic drug-based, which is what pharmaceuticals are? No. Is it a vaccine? No. Is it anything that you in the world are familiar with? Not really. And that's what makes it really unique, really different, and very powerful, because it's not a silo, and it's really what I'm trying to do here is to stretch your brains a little bit and think outside, and get outside of the box. Because our natural human nature tendency is to try to find relevance. Okay, so this is sort of like this, or it's kind of like that. Or how does it fit into a box that I'm familiar with? This doesn't. So that's why this is so powerful and why it goes above and beyond all the types of therapies and things that you've come to know. One more, and then we got to move on.
Could you have allergic reactions to this treatment?
No. No, you really don't, because it's oxygen bond rated. Now, you can have something that's called a Herxheimer reaction, which a Herxheimer reaction is that you kill off a lot of bugs really fast. And Dan had one of those.
Yeah.
When he first
I'll tell you about it.
when he first started it, he'll tell you about it and why he was glad that he had my hand to hang on to when he first started this. So come up here and tell him
right.
a little more of your story.
No more tears. I'm through the bad part. I lived. I want to talk to you for a few minutes about what my life has been since I got on the BX protocol. It's been a little bit over a year now. And in looking back, everything is, in hindsight, is 20/20. When I look back, my diagnosis of COPD, way back when, was a surrendering. It was a white flag. It was we give up. What the doctors were saying was there's nothing we can do for you. We can pump you full of a lot of drugs and make you feel better, but we can't make you better. I didn't realize it at the time, but that's what that diagnosis was. So I ended up on 20 different drugs. As Sherri told you, I'm down to next to nothing. I take 3 milligrams of prednisone a day. I was doing at least 20 before. I had a bunch of inhalers. I haven't used an inhaler since November of 2013. No PICC lines, no nothing. So that's one of the good things that's happened to me. No more drugs. Another good thing that's happened to me, when I went to see Sherri to get the BX protocol, she said, "What do you want to get out of this?" And I said, "I want to be able to walk to the mailbox." And she thought I meant down the street. I meant the slot in the wall of my living room.
And let me tell you how he said it. He said, I know I'm not doing very well, and if I could only get to the mailbox, and I thought he meant down, if I could only get there, I would think this was a raving success. If I could go out to dinner with my lovely wife once in a while and be able to enjoy a meal, if I could just do that, I would think this was a raving success. Yeah, and that was the tone of voice he said it, because he said, I don't have a lot of high expectations because I know that how bad I am. And so that's where we started from, and I said, well, okay, we can do that.
Yeah. So, I wanted to go to the mailbox, and now I can go to the mailbox. I can go to any mailbox. I walk everywhere. I wanted to walk with my wife on the streets of Paris, which we'll do next year. We had a trip scheduled last year, but we had to cancel it because I was on my deathbed. I was close to death. But so that's one of the things. I can walk again. I work out 5 days a week. I have a stationary bike at home. And I work out about 30, 40 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And I noticed that when I was taking prednisone, my heart rate was always around 115, 120 a minute, sitting, doing nothing. And now, in order to get to that heart rate on my bike, I got to pump like crazy, and I got to increase the resistance. My heart rate has come down into the 60s now, so I got to work like heck to get up to my aerobic levels. So I'm working out again. What else good has happened to me? One of the greatest things that happened to me, in February 2013, late one night, I started to cough up a lot of blood. A lot of blood. And that is truly a come to judgment moment in your life. So my wife took me to the hospital. I spent a couple of days there. The doctors hit me with everything they had. They said, we're gonna blast you with everything. And it was kind of like their last hurrah, before my last hurrah. So they did that, and they sent me home, with oxygen. And it was one of the saddest days of my life. The guy brought the concentrator in, brought all the cylinders in, and I knew that this was the omen, this was the beginning of the end. This was it. So, go forward to a year, February of 2014. It's my birthday month. So what do I do for my birthday? I give myself a very special gift. I call the oxygen company and I cancel the oxygen. The girl on the other end says, I got to tell you the story. The girl on the other end says, you what? I said, I want to cancel my oxygen She said, who's the patient? I said, I am. And there was a pause, and she said, well, you're going to have your doctor call, your pulmonologist. And so I did, and he called, and he canceled it. And it dawned on me later on that patients don't call and cancel their oxygen. Their next of kin does. But I called and canceled my own. The guy came and took it out. It was the best birthday gift I ever had. It was the tastiest piece of birthday cake I ever had. So I got rid of my oxygen. We travel now. In March of this year, keep in mind, in February, I'm coughing up blood, 2013. I'm on oxygen. March, the following year, 2014, we go to Ireland. My wife has relatives over there. We went over for an Irish wedding. And if you go to Ireland for an Irish wedding, take your BX protocol. Because they start at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they go until 6 the following morning. So you need it. But I mean, I walked the hills of Ireland. I had no trouble at all. Brian wants me to mention this too. I took my inhaler with me, my rescue inhaler. It was my insurance, but I never used it. As a matter of fact, I would never, before when I was sick, I would never go anywhere without it. If I forgot it, I'd get back, I'd get in the car and I'd go back home and get it. So we're traveling. We're going to go to North and South Carolina next month. I went to Utah this summer. We're going to go to Paris and Italy next year. And I'm going to do it all without oxygen. Nothing to drag, no hoses, no nothing. And I mean, I see some of you wearing it tonight. It's such a horrible thing to, stuff tangles up in your legs and it pulls your nose and it pulls your ears and your hair. It's terrible.
Ian,
So, yes.
tell her about your Herxheimer reaction.
Okay, that was my next. Has everything that happened to me been good? No. Yes and no. I had a Herxheimer reaction, a healing crisis, if you will. I didn't know what it was. I got very, very sick about 6 weeks to 8 weeks after I was on the BX protocol. So my first reaction was to call my pulmonologist. Because no matter what I ever had in my life, if I had an infected hangnail, I ended up with pneumonia. Everything went to my lungs. So I thought I'm getting pneumonia. I got a fever of 103 plus. I ache all over. I got the chill so bad, I'm shaking myself to death. I mean, I got a headache. I'm coughing. I thought I had pneumonia. So rather than call my pulmonologist, I had the presence of mind to call my Dr. Tenpenny here, my BX protocol. And she said, Dan, listen to me. Relax. She said, I know you don't feel good, but she said, your body is doing you a favor. It's throwing off all this stuff. You're having a Herxheimer reaction. It's getting rid of it in a natural way. So she said, she held my hand, put your hands on the wheel, put your head down, and just get through this thing without antibiotics, without prednisone, without any of that stuff. A couple of days later, I did. And I've been recovering ever since. And so my life is pretty good right now.
Let me embellish that a little bit.
Pardon me?
Let me embellish that a little bit.
Well, all right, if you want to. All right.
And his good wife will affirm, Dan's like Mr. Optimism, right?
Oh, yeah, right. I'll just pull that fancy.
So Dan wasn't always the glass is half full kind of guy. And when he started getting sick on that week, and I happened to be in Las Vegas that weekend at a conference. And he calls me, and all along, he's like, well, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. And Bernie and I are like being the go team rah-rah cheerleaders. Well, I don't know. Got these 2 little bottles. I paid all this money. I don't know about this, Tenpenny. I just don't know. And so when he called me, and I was in Las Vegas, and he said, I'm so sick. And I said, you put your hands on those steering wheel, and I'm going to put my hands on top of them. And if I think you need to go to the hospital, I will tell you. But in the meantime, you got to ride this out. Because on top of Dan's COPD, he also had a condition called bronchiectasis. Do you guys, anybody know what that is? What that is that your lungs sort of fill up with pus. And constantly you lose your ability, the little cilia in your little hairs on the inside of your lungs, which are normally there sweeping out junk that's in your lungs all the time, don't work anymore. So you end up, and literally what people with COPD compounded with bronchiectasis, when they die, they kind of drown in their own mucus stuff in their lungs. It's a horrible thing. So he was really even much worse than what your typical COPD patient was. And this mucusy stuff that would come up and out and just awful smelling, tasting, just horrible stuff. And I said, you've got to ride this out because for the first time, we're cutting across here and getting these mitochondria better. Those little hairs are starting to come alive, those little cilia, and trying to get this stuff out of there. You go back and get an antibiotic, you're going to shut this whole thing down. Now I want you to call me or text me every 2 hours, round the clock. Every 2 hours, I want you to call me. And if I think you need to go to the hospital, I will let you know. And he did. I'm terrible. I'm really bad. Go to the hospital. I said, do you have a fever? No. Is your pulse ox okay? Yes. Are you coughing up blood? No. Then sit down, you'll be fine. Call me in 2 hours. And we did this for most of the better part of the weekend. And by Monday, the fever had broken, he felt better, his oxygen was better. He said, I feel weak. Well, of course you would feel weak, because if you had the flu or something, you'd feel bad. And he said, I think something shifted. I think something changed. And so—
My attitude.
Well, it was the beginning change of your attitude, just the start. So when he says, when you ask the question, are there any allergic reactions, the answer is no. But can you have a reaction to getting rid of years of steroids, years of inhalers, years of all kinds of antibiotics and all these other things that have been in your system that your body's kind of trying to shake off and get rid of? Yes, you can. And can that be kind of scary? Yes, it can. And that's why I just grabbed hold of his hand and said, come on, buddy, we're riding this out. And so that's kind of where that went. So I want to invite Bernie up. Bernie is this lovely, I've known Dan for 15 years. She comes one day and shows up in the office. I said, this is the better half that I've been hearing about all these years. And I really wanted Bernie to come, and when we were talking about this, because I wanted her to tell her side of the story. All of you that are spouses of somebody that's been really sick, and whether it's been a husband or a wife or a mother or an aunt or your best friend or somebody that's been really sick in your life and you've just watched them sort of dwindle away in front of you. So I wanted to have Bernie tell what her version of the pre-BX, the BX, of where they are now.
Well, welcome to all of you. I want you to enjoy the same success and the same health that we are for either you or your loved one, because this is crucial and this is working. Because Mr. Positive has been shown that there is something out there that works, and the clinic was not it. And you know yourself, when a family member of yours is sick, you will do anything. You will move heaven and earth to make sure you get them comfortable, or you find something to help them, or you whisper sweet nothings like, you die on me, I'll kill you. Warm and loving, because I think they should know that, you know? So, starting from there, we knew when we were getting married that there was going to be an issue. We were told, now, no offense, fellas, but it's good to have a woman in the room when the doctor's talking, because you guys miss so much. You just don't hear it. And they said, the doctor, I'll never forget it, he says, at 44, you're going to be having issues with your lungs. And I said, well, we were only 22, so of course that's, a millennium away, so no problem. And I was thinking, medicine, it's going to get better, something's going to happen, and we're going to find success in this area. So we're going along, and as you know, COPD is insipid, and it's slow to show itself. So there were issues, and he was working on a case at one time. He doesn't want to hear this, he doesn't want to believe it, but the doctor in the hospital room said, you were working with Xerox toner. He was with the FBI doing an indictment against trafficking, poor guy. And he said the Xerox toner has destroyed your lungs. You have permanent hospital pneumonia. And with that, I took him out and took him on a trip. And he pouted from Venice to Rome. And I'm thinking, well, isn't this fun? And okay, it's the last time I'm going to do this. But it was true. And from that time, there was a progressive, slow decline. Okay, we fast forward to, by this time he's got the oxygen now. We're going to Asheville to see Biltmore, and we're pretending, that everything's going to move along. We're going to get rid of this machine. We know in the back of our minds we're not going to get rid of that machine. And we're going to the Biltmore. Dan could not go through the Biltmore. He couldn't do the stairs. He couldn't, so I'm running up and like an idiot thinking, no longer does the Biltmore mean anything to me. So we're going through the streets. And he's sitting on a park bench, and I'm walking around, and I'm thinking, this is not okay. This is, I mean, I'm coming up to see him, and he's just not looking good. And that was April. Okay, so the family gets together. Dan's sister had come home. She had had a brain tumor, thank you to NutraSweet, and they had her in a stage 4 cancer. So the whole family got together every year, and we rented a big house, and a doctor friend of ours said, this is the year where Dan is going to beat Marcy to the cemetery. He's going to go first before she does. And she's stage 4 cancer. And we spent the whole, pardon?
Speak louder.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dan and I spent the whole time pounding his back because of the aspergillosis, the bronchiectasis, everything, to get the mucus out of his lungs. We spent our whole vacation trying to get that up. Every single day, every 2 hours. That was our vacation. And he would eventually maybe have a few moments where he could go and sit at the table with his brothers or talk with the kids, but it was not very, very long. And then we were going to go home, and we were going to have breakfast with the family, and I'm doing all the driving. And he's got all his machinery, and it's in the front seat of the car, and he said, Bern, we're going straight home. I can't make it to breakfast. I said, okay, we have a problem. I have low blood pressure. If I don't eat, we're in trouble. I had an apple and a pear, and that was it. So you see those little signs on the road saying aerial surveillance, and that was the best thing I ever saw. I said, do you think they have a plane up and they're going to check on people who speed? And he said, no, they can't afford to put a plane up. It's not going to happen. So I said, let's test this theory. So I hit that puppy to 90 miles an hour on the turnpike. I said, someone has got to have the decency to stop me. Anybody here a state trooper? And where were you people? It took, a state to get a state trooper to stop me. And finally, one does. This little blonde, blue-eyed little kid. And he comes, you know how they come to the side of your car. We'd like to see your license and your registration. And he looks over at Dan and says, oh my God. I said, bingo, that's it, honey. And I tried to get out of the car to tell him, would you take us to a hospital? He says, you can't get out, ma'am. So he goes to his car and checks on my license, and he comes back, and he said, you don't have a record. You don't have a ticket. I said, I'll make you a deal. Give me 5 tickets, but take us to a hospital. And he says, I can't do that. No. Let's try to take me to a hospital. And he said, ma'am, I can, but you've got to slow down. I said, we have to get to a hospital. It's as simple as that. And Dan, in the meantime, is talking to the other guy saying, I don't need that. I'm thinking, oh, mother of God. What was God thinking when he made you people? No offense, but, I don't get it. But anyway, so he didn't give me a ticket. God love him. But you know what? I wouldn't have cared. It was that crucial. So we're in the car, and Mr. Perky is sitting there, and I'm thinking, okay, this is it. We're not doing this anymore. You know what his comment was? I had to laugh. He says, I didn't know you were that worried. Gentlemen, pay attention, So I said, okay, this is where things change. You want to go to the clinic? I know what they're going to do for you. Next to nothing, because they've done nothing so far. I'm fed up with them. But we do have a little gal we can go visit. And you're going to go there because I'm not taking you unless you promise you're going. And that was the start of Dr. Tenpenny and the BX protocol. I cannot tell you how thrilled and how successful and how quickly it happened. We saw success because he was dying. He was blue. His tissue was turning blue. And that's the way it was. And there's nothing like sleeping with that oxygen machine going, and you're thinking, it's all over the house. The tubes are all over. And when your friends come in the house and they see it and their face drops, that's reality. But with the start of BX, I couldn't believe the success rate. I mean, he started, and it was as insipid as the COPD is to take your air away. The BX was that insipid and making you better and better and better. His skin color got better. And now his oxygen is better than mine. Really? It is. His oxygen level is better than mine. And I run, and he's up to 99. I cannot tell you how grateful we are to Dr. Tenpenny for coming up with this, being part of it, because without it, I'd be a widow, and I think God knew all along I would make a bad widow. I would not be a good one. And I think he's sparing all my friends that. But the whole point is that you have the chance to get this to help you. And I went out to Utah and I met some of these people, and there were all kinds of things, lymphomas and cancers, and I said to Dan, I said, where is Tim that has all the facial tumors? And he said, you just shook his hand. And I said, oh, well, where are they? Well, they're gone. And so on and so forth. But what a great staff. What a wonderful program. It's not that it's brand new. It's not brand new. The research was started in the 20s. And then a long time ago. This is not brand new. But in the last 20 years, they've been using it. And it works. I just hope you can get on board and take advantage of it and have the same success we're having, because that's what I want for all of you. And everybody who has anything, this is not fair, because there is an answer. And it's a good one. And it is not pharmaceutical or AMA based. That's my business too. I'm a hygienist for 45 years, and we see it all the time. And we're fed up with what's happening in our business. And this is a success. Yes?
What did his doctors say?
Oh, you're gonna love this one. He's supposed to be here. And he said, well, are you still taking that happy juice? And now keep in mind, now I don't know about how many of you know, the patients I have, they have admitted, some of them have admitted, when they give meds, they get a kickback. When they give a script, they get a kickback. Now that is, you know, when I was at Ohio State in '68, which was just a few years ago, we were told not to believe the AMA or the FDA. That was in 1968. Get those people off your pedestals. They don't belong there. Dr. Stephen Keller, Columbia University, NIH, he's part of the immunology department, and he says, get those people off their pedestals. None of them belong there. And fortunately, our kids, the younger people coming in, are already into that. They're already smart enough to know, get them off. They don't deserve the respect they think they should have, because they are really not healthy. I mean, you've seen commercials for pharmaceuticals. They give the lawyer hasn't did, they give so many contraindications for why this might hurt you. Then why take it? You know, I have migraines. They wanted to give me a migraine medication. It has two of them have a nasty little side effect. One is bloodletting, and the other one's a heart attack. Now, why would I take that med? You know, and being a midget, I can take less meds because they overreact. It's just not, it's not worth it. So, any questions? Yes?
So basically, the doctors at the clinic's reactions to your, besides the happy juice.
I'm sad you asked that question.
I mean, I'm curious to see what the regular medical doctors feel about.
Yeah, I had a pulmonologist at the clinic, and in spite of my improvement, he is not sold. I wish I could say he was.
And he's the one that said that you were ready to go out.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
He was the guy.
Yeah.
I think part of his skepticism is that he has a lot of people like me. They usually die. He has a lot of people like me that try alternatives, like going to India for stem cell research, which he told me several people did, and they died anyway. So I think he is not on the bandwagon. He's a Western medicine guy, an allopathic medicine guy, and he's a great guy, but he's
Have you gone
not.
back to him
Pardon me?
since you're in the shape you're in right now? I mean, have you gone back to him?
No, I
so he
went
can
back to
actually
see him
get
once, but,
Well,
you know,
that's
just for a
okay.
checkup.
You've been back a couple times.
Yeah, I was supposed to go in August, but I was out of town.
He goes into he's gone into the office, and one of the first things that he does is they put a pulse oximeter on his finger and walk him around the office. And now they walk him around more and more and more because they keep waiting for him to
Yeah.
desat, and he doesn't.
I'm doing 97,
And he's-
98 all the time.
He's getting 96, 97% before he would do this. He does a spirometry now, and it's normal. And he did have he got a chest x-ray, you know, that was.
December, I think, and
Yeah,
it was
December,
improved, yeah.
I wasn't real sure, there was a mark on there, I wasn't real sure what it was, and he went to see it, and was able to pull up his past x-rays, you know, in the clinic. He said not to worry, it was just the same. So Dan's in there, he's just fine. He's off all of his inhalers. He's down to, like you said, 3 milligrams of prednisone, he's down to 1, we put him back up to 5, now you tell me you're down to 3.
Down to 3.
So that, and see, to me, the conventional medical mind has no slot in it for that. I mean, you know, we have spaces that we plug things into our brains, right? Things that, you know, I mean, like, this is kind of a bizarre example, but like, some people believe in UFOs, right? And some people say it's totally nonsense, baloney, there's no way. Well, the people who can get their head around that has a little slot in there of curiosity. Like, well, maybe, I don't know, you can't prove that it's not theirs, but I'm open to it. Well, with conventional doctors, it's been my experience. Now, most of you guys are my patients, but, you know, I was board certified in emergency medicine, and I was the director of an emergency department for 12 years. So before I got into alternative medicine, I did everything you could do as an ER doc. I ran a 3-county EMS system. I mean, I put in big lines, intubated people, and cracked chests with the best of them, right? I mean, I did all that stuff. So I come from that world. I just tell people, like I talked to a guy the other day about a patient, a physician, and she wanted to come off of Coumadin. She'd only been on it 2 weeks, right? And so I said, well, I think we can do that. We were going to do these things instead. You know, and I told him, and he said, I don't know what any of that stuff is. I said, that's okay. You don't need to. I'm just telling you what I can do. And he said, well, it's my thing that somebody needs to be on Coumadin because they have an irregular heartbeat. And I said, you're right. You cannot stop Coumadin unless you're going to replace it with something else. I just happen to have a bigger toolbox. Your toolbox is this big. It's called a prescription pad. I have a bigger toolbox that has lots of different tools in it that I can use. And I can't tell you over the years, because I've had my clinic now since '96, over the years of patients like Dan, or other people that are completely better from whatever was ailing them. And they go back to their conventional doctor, and they get this deer in the headlights look on their face, like they don't know what to do with it. And it makes me really sad, not only as a physician, but as a human being. Because if you were sitting on an airplane or on a bus or in a restaurant and started telling somebody your story, that you went from near death to completely better, normal human curiosity would go, what did you do? And how did that work? Tell me about that. Doctors don't want to hear it. They have lost their sense of, in my opinion, humanity and normal human curiosity of going, wow, if I learned about that, I might have 50 other people that might be interested in that. They may not be the right candidate. I don't know enough about it. Maybe I should learn a little bit. Maybe I can find out enough about it because there might be 20 or 30 more patients in my practice that might benefit from that. But they don't do any of that. And some of it is they're locked into their system. They're locked into their paycheck. They're locked into their protocols. They don't want to get any bull crap from their colleagues. They just want to march their little thing. Who suffers from that? The patients do. The patients, you guys, you people who go in there to see those people hoping they're going to find something out of the box, something different, something that's going to make you better, because nothing in your world is making you better, but they don't do it. And just a minute. And it makes me really sad as a human, because doctors are people too, right? They have families and all this other stuff, but they just don't get it. So the questions of like, Dan, and I can't tell you how many times you said your pulmonologist is this great guy, and he calls him on the phone, how are you doing? Yeah. Are you getting better, as he watches him slowly slip into his grave? But now that he's better, there's no slot in there. There's no slot in there to try to ask those next sorts of questions. So when I were talking about these things, not only are we sort of asking you to stretch your belief system a bit into a different way of thinking about disease, that something can treat cancer and COPD and asthma and Lyme's disease, the same molecule, pretty much the same dose, the same type of diet, because you're alkalinizing the diet and doing some different supplements to make you better, but you're also having to rethink about your relationship with your physician. Now, nobody's here saying, like what your question was about, do I just stop all this stuff and do that? And the answer is no. Everything has to be transitioned off. Even if you just came to our office for high blood pressure, and you came in and said, I'm on 4 blood pressure medications, I want to get off of these. Well, we don't just say, okay, we're going to stop that and put you on fish oils. I mean, there's other things you have to do to get the health thing along the way. The last thing that happens, if you're on a bunch of medications, the last thing that happens is you start to peel off the pharmaceuticals. And sometimes if you're on, let's say you're on 7 different drugs, Wouldn't it just be better if you could get down to one? Think about how that would be for your liver, your pocketbook. I mean, even your co-pays that you have to pay on these drugs instead of paying for 7, maybe you could get it down to 1 or 2. It's a step in the right direction. Give your body another year to heal, because you got sick to where you are now over decades. We expect alternative medicine to make us better in 2 weeks. We hold these things to a different type of standard. You know, and if it doesn't work 100% of the time, then it's a failure. What? You tell me one thing in conventional medicine that works even 90% of the time. It really doesn't. Maybe strep throat, maybe with penicillin, maybe, but not with everybody. There isn't anything in conventional medicine that works 100% of the time. So these are some different things to sort of think about. So Dan, why don't you tell them about the rest of the protocol?
Okay. We want to give you time for questions, so I'll try and go through this as quickly as I can. This is wonderful stuff. You've heard all about it, how it works, what it does. You've seen what it did for me. Now, how do you get this stuff? There's an organization called the Delta Institute International. It's a global health organization, and I want to read you real briefly from their mission statement, because I can never remember this. To produce measurable health outcomes of a permanent nature, the complete and total restoration of optimal health. If you turn on your TV, spend 5 or 10 minutes watching it, you'll see 1 or 2 ads for prescription drugs, and they talk about making you feel better. None of them talk about making you better. This organization is talking about that. We're going to make you better, permanent, optimal health. And that's the difference. So how do you check into this thing? First thing you do is you make a phone call to the Delta Institute, and you set up a phone consultation with Dr. Dwayne Smith. The man, you don't.
First thing you do is you get an email from me.
I'm sorry. You got to, that's right, I'm sorry. You have to go through Sherri, call Sherri's office and get an email.
There'll be a card at the end that will give you the instructions, but primarily you get referred in as a member through me.
That's right, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so you get referred in, they get you to Angela Burge, who's the executive director, who then gets you to Dr. Smith.
Okay.
Okay.
And you set up a phone consultation with Dr. Smith. He'll call you back at your convenience, ask him anything you want. What does this stuff do? How does it work? How successful? Are you a bunch of con artists? Whatever. And he will answer all your questions. So let's say at the end of that conversation, he says to you either yes or no, we can help you, or we can't help you. Say he says we can help you. So what happens after that? Now, how do you become, what are you going to get if you become a member of the Delta Institute International? A lot of things, and I'm going to touch on just a couple of them right now. First of all, you're going to get a case manager, somebody who handles your case. You call them, you contact them, you email them, they answer all your questions, they advise you, they're there for you whenever you need them. That's the first thing you get. You're going to get a special diet as well. You're going to get something called a back office, a web-based back office account. And what that, and I think this is the way medicine is evolving. Matter of fact, if you're going to see a doctor at the Cleveland Clinic, he or she spends the first 15 minutes on a computer putting in data, and then they examine me. So with this web-based back office account, what you do is you upload all of your medical records. I went and got my Cleveland Clinic records. I uploaded them all into my account. I go in every day and I put in my vital signs, my blood pressure, my pulse, my oxygen. If I do any exercise, I put that in there. My diet, I put that in there. I put in all this data every day. I put in any positive reactions, any Herxheimer's reactions, which we spoke about before. I put all that in there so that they have something to look at. They have something to evaluate. So if I want to email my case manager and ask him about this or that or whatever, he writes back with an answer. If I want to talk to him or her, I just write, send them an email. They call me back. We set up some kind of a phone consultation. If you want to talk to Dr. Smith himself, the guy who invented this stuff, do the same thing. Set up some kind of a phone consultation. He'll give you a call back. 4 times a week, he has a webcast. And as a member of the Delta Institute, you can sign into the web and go on. I think it's on Tuesdays and Thursdays, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, both days. And you can come on any time on a Tuesday or Thursday. He will do a case review. You ask him any questions you got, he'll answer you, by way of the internet. He'll talk to you, there's audio on this webcast, but it's confidential. So these are some of the things you get. There's many, many others, and I just don't have the time to go into them right now. But that's how you become a member. That's the process. You want me to keep going? Okay. Now the elephant in the room. How much does this cost? When I was going through the BX protocol and I was going to see Dr. Tenpenny, she hit me with a line that I remember. She said, "Good health is not like McDonald's, Dan. It's not cheap and it's not fast." So, before I get to that, when I got into the program, it was almost a no-brainer for me because I was dying. So, I was probably going to do this thing no matter what because there was nothing left for me at the Cleveland Clinic or conventional medicine. But I think what you have to ask yourself is, excuse me, how much money you're spending now. And I did that. I went back to 2010, 11, 12, and 13. And I was averaging about $5,000 a year out of pocket. That was only for my respiratory. I didn't count anything else. My respiratory ailments, my medications, my co-pays, hospitalizations, deductibles, any of that. And I added that all up, so it was about $5,000 a year that I was shelling out over and above my insurance. What you have to consider is in 2013 I went on Medicare, and my cost went way down. So that year was kind of a wash, but I was still doing $5,000, about $5,000 a year. I also was a federal employee. I retired from the FBI, where I was worked as an intelligence analyst, which is an oxymoron, I know, but and it was. But I had very good health care. I had a $300 a year deductible, $600 per family. So after I met that $300 deductible, my insurance picked up 90% of the cost. So that $5,000 I was spending a year was only 10% of what I was really spending. I had like 20 prescription drugs. I had one drug I was taking, tobramycin, to try and kill this fungus in my lungs. That was a $300 copay for that alone. In 2013, I went in the hospital with the blood, and they hit me with everything they could. And they sent me home with oxygen, and they sent me home with this. It's a vest. This is cutting edge. This is the best there is. Now, one of the problems I had was I had a lot of mucus, and I couldn't bring it up. So it was choking me. I was drowning on my own mucus. So the doctor wrote a prescription. I called the company, and I got this vest. Now what happens is there's two hoses here. Two hoses go into this. I didn't bring the machine with me. It's about the size of a bread box. Does anybody remember what a bread box is? Oh, the time rolls by fast, doesn't it? Two hoses go on here, and it vibrates. It blows up. It vibrates. I did a half an hour in the morning, half an hour at night. It was supposed to loosen all that mucus, and it didn't. My wife would put me on a lazy boy recliner, my feet up in the air, my head down on the floor at a 45-degree angle, and she would lovingly beat on my back. I used to get all kinds of mucus up, and it didn't cost me anything. You know how much this cost with the bread box and the hoses? $16,000. You can look that up on the internet. It's called the vest, and I think it's made by Hillrom. So that's what I got, besides the oxygen coming out of the Cleveland Clinic. So that was $16,000. My part of it was, $1,500, $1,600. So I think what you have to consider before I tell you how much this is how much are you spending now? This is a one-year membership, 52 weeks. You get all, and I should mention, you get the BX protocol with this program, obviously. And one of the things that happened to me was I started out with one level of BX protocol. In the year that I've been on it, they've had so many improvements. One of them, a major breakthrough, and you get all those updates in the BX protocol. They send you the better stuff, and you start using that. So for a 52-week program, it is $17,000. Did I hear anybody gasp? Does anybody have the air to gasp? So I spent my $17,000. And I signed up in July. We went on that vacation my wife told you about in August. And I had the worst week of my life. We came back. A neighbor was getting my mail for me. I knew the BX protocol was arriving while we were gone. So I asked the neighbor, I said, this box will come, get it in the house right away, put it in the refrigerator right away. She did that. I come home, I stumble into the house with my oxygen and my hoses and huffing and puffing and coughing and wheezing. And I go to the refrigerator, there's the cardboard box. The holy grail. I take it out of the refrigerator, I open it up, and there's all this packing. And I find this in there. This is it. So I said, well, that's one. That's one. And I go through the rest of the box, there's nothing else. Now keep in mind, I've spent $17,000. I got a box I could have got at Walgreens. $4, $5. I open it up. Nothing up my sleeve. Here's what's in there. A bottle of Izine and some little sugar pills. And I was furious. I thought I was taken. And I was going to call Dr. Tenpenny. Instead, I called the Delta Institute. And I said, what is going on? I said, I got a bottle of Izine and some sugar pills. And the guy on the other end said to me, he said, I know. He said, it looks ridiculous. He said, I've seen miraculous things done with those two stupid little bottles. So these drops go under your tongue, and then the pills go under your tongue.
It's not Visine.
Pardon me? No, it's not Visine. No.
Clarify that.
This was the first generation of the BX, okay? So I put it under my tongue, I put the pills under my tongue, and it worked. And then, of course, I mean, they've been upgrading it ever since. But that's what you have to ask yourself. What are you spending now? I figure within 3.5 years, I'll get my 17 grand back. Or I could have bought a cheap economy car and died, okay? But I think the important question is, and Sherri will emphasize this even more, is whatever you're doing now, are you getting any better? I think that's really the only question you have to ask. If I was still getting help at the Cleveland Clinic, I'd still be there. Nothing against those people. They did the best they could with what they had to work with, but I was getting worse. So it's kind of lunacy to continue that. So that's where we are. Doctor, did you want to?
Well, I just wanted to say, when you do the math on that, that's about $40 a day. And there are all sorts of different ways that you can finance different things. But, you know, if you don't intercede to do something to get better, knowing what COPD is in your life, where do you think you're going to be 2 years from now? And 3 years from now? And if you're not as bad as what Dan was, you know, like literally, I mean, Sandy and I will attest to this. I mean, Dan's been a long-standing patient / friend, you know, for a long time. And we really didn't think he'd live to Christmas. And I think Bernie would attest to that from July and August when they went down in they went on vacation in the Poconos and they were up in the pollen and the mold and the piece that she forgot in her story about the cop thing was that she was sobbing. She was crying. Yeah. And that's when Dan said to her, gee, I didn't think you were that concerned, you know? Because she's looking at this as, this might be the last time she ever goes away with her husband anywhere. And that was gonna not be it's not gonna get any better. And so that's when they made the decision to say, you know, they're not wealthy people. Dan's retired, he's on Medicare, he's, retired from the FBI, she's a dental hygienist. But they're gonna figure out a way to make it work because they now have another long time ahead of things that they can do. And what if you did this program and you didn't have quite the success Dan did? What if you were only 50% better? What if you didn't have to be on your oxygen all the time? What if you had more energy? What if you cut your co-pays on your bills by 50%? And what if you just started to feel better? What if you were 30% better? What if, like what Dan said when he started the program and he said honestly, He said, if I could just walk to the mailbox and not feel like, because he tells some of his stories that I've heard about, when he walks upstairs at night, he'd walk down in the morning and sit there all day long just on oxygen at the bottom of the stairs, and he'd go up at night, he'd take one step and huff and puff, and then another step and huff and puff. Then it might take him 30 or 35 minutes to get up 10 steps. And now they're hiking in mold and moisture and everything else in Ireland. So they made the commitment, and I've said that it's not for everybody. I mean, this program is for people who are willing to be self-responsible. They want to take care of themselves, and they're tired of doing the same thing over and over again. You know that expression, you keep doing what you're doing to keep getting what you got? Except with COPD, you're not going to keep getting what you got, because each year it's going to be a little worse. And so it's not for everybody. I mean, people need to want to be able to take responsibility. They are willing to do the work in terms of following the diet. There's a list of foods that come with it, that those are the thou shalt eat only foods. You take that list with you to the grocery store. If it's not on that list, you don't buy it, because it's about the alkalinization and detoxing the things from your system. Now with the non-cancer silo, they're a little bit more flexible than the cancer silo, as you can imagine. Because this has really got to be pretty rigid. This can have a little bit more flexibility, but I always caution people about flexibility being a slippery slope. Because, the first, you're a little bit flexible and a little bit flexible, and first thing you've just thrown the whole baby out with the bathwater. They have a fabulous, it's about this thick, recipe book of all the different things that they use, that's part of your program. You can download it off of the back office. People have to be motivated. They have to be willing to stick with it, because with the first 6 weeks were pretty rocky when Dan started, and then he went through that Herxheimer reaction, and he was like, I don't know about all this. I just don't know. I don't know. I said, if I hear you say that one more time, and so we would send emails back and forth, and people who are my patient that are in the program have access to me by a HIPAA-compliant email that they can answer questions. We can make appointments in the office. If you come in the office, make an appointment. If you come into the office for office visits, there's regular office visit charges, just like what we normally do. I mean, this is and they have blood tests and things that they want you to do. Now, the blood tests I don't think are as rigorous for COPD or the non-cancers what they are for the cancer patients, because cancer patients, they're looking at tumor markers and all kinds of other stuff, which you really don't have. So that's really, where people, it's all about your mindset. And, a lot of people will say, well, should I talk to my regular doctor about it? You can. Nobody's going to say not to, but he's not going to know anything about it. And B, depending on your relationship with your doctor, your doctors might say, yeah, what the heck? What have you got to lose? Some time and some money. Other doctors, like when women come into our practice and they get thermograms, breast thermography, they take it and show it to their regular doctor, and the doctor literally throws it across the room and disparages them for wasting their money. So it kind of depends on what your relationship is with your doctor. We never tell you to not see your doctor. You don't have to be my patient. You can do this, it can be managed through the Delta Institute, which a lot of people are, but it's kind of nice to have somebody locally as they start unwinding some of your medications, or like if you have a Herxheimer reaction or something like that. So we got about 15 minutes left for open questions, and then we've got some door prizes we want to give for thanking your time. And Missy pointed out to me, we were going to give you, as you left, a card that says, actually, can you hand me that on the top part there? It's a card in your packet that looks like this. It looks like this. That says, thank you for attending our seminar, and the things on the back. If you are not a patient, you want to become a patient, for me, our phone number is there. If you want to just talk to Dan more specifically, about his experience, what he's been through and things like that, Dan's cell phone number's on there. He's willing to take your numbers. This is the steps that you can take to set up an appointment with Dr. Smith to talk about maybe your specific condition, because you said you've got something that's unusual, so you would want to have a consultation with him. There's a lot of information on the website, and so we were going to hand these to you as you left, but you already have them. So this is most of the follow-up information that you're gonna kind of need. So any questions?
I just wanted to add,
Oh, sorry.
before I
Dan.
forget, this program First of all, the $17,000 has to be paid all at once. Because if you do it in increments, there's not a commitment there. Good news or bad news, I don't know which. The second thing is, this thing is web-based and it's done in your home. You don't have to go to Utah, you don't have to go to the Cleveland Clinic. Everything is done in your home, except if you need to go to a doctor's office or a blood test or something like that. It's all home-based, and it's driven by the patients. You're the ones that enter all this information about yourself. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's great. Thank you for bringing that up, because that is one of the benefits. For like cancer patients, they get treated from home. For this is something you do at home. It's not something you have to come back and forth to my office to get a shot, because it's not a shot anymore. It's a sublingual drop or a spray. So you are directed based on your symptoms and your commitment, because the more information you put into that back office, it's a two-directional thing, right? It's just like any other relationship. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. But it's in what Dan said about they have that you pay the full amount up front, because it's just like when you prepay anything, right? You do prepaid chiropractic, right? You know, some of those things you pay for 40 treatments, you prepaid them, well, you're going to go to all of them. Or you do a prepaid anything, Massage Envy. You buy a package of 10, you're going to go to all 10 of them because you've prepaid it, you've made a commitment. And so this is that you've made a commitment that you're going to follow through with it, which then goes back to what I said about it's not for everybody. Because some people just don't have a stick-to-it ability. They just don't. And that's okay. That's not a judgment. But it is one thing for you to consider, saying, am I willing to make the commitment, the financial commitment, the time commitment, the effort to change my diet, to change what I'm doing things, because I know it's time for me to make some serious changes in my life, to do what I can to get better, rather than having my doctor manage my disease until I die. Because that's what physicians do these days, right? Pain management, whatever management, right? So what questions do you guys have? We got about 12 minutes. We'll start over here and move that way. Okay, yes?
Is that a one-time,
One time.
and you could stay on it for life?
At the end of the year, there's an option for renewal. There is a fee for that, which changes. Right now, it's about 50% for a second year. Some people, it's a third. I mean, some of those things changes, but I wouldn't be too concerned about the second year until after you go through the first year. Because by the time you get through the first year, I guarantee you it's going to change, because those are all things that are changing right now.
I was gonna ask, is it a lifelong commitment to stay well then?
Well, of
I mean,
course.
I hope so.
No,
I hope so.
You know what I mean, but to take the medication, for instance, for you.
No, the medication's a year.
Is it possible that it will, if he stops, that it'll decline?
Well, they took me off it for a while during the first year, for that very reason. They wanted to see what my baseline was. And I stabilized, so I was okay.
So
But,
remember
yeah,
what
you
the
can-
remember what the mission statement that he read? They're talking about using the big C word, the big cure word that all the rest of us get like beat up by our state medical boards for saying that, because we know it's a lie. Okay? So that's what they're talking about. Yes?
So they took you off of it, and you did just fine.
They took me off it for a couple of months to see how I would do.
Why did you go back on it?
I went back on it let's see, what is this, September? I went back on it in August.
Why?
And because they wanted to, they had a new and improved version of it.
If you were doing just fine, why would you go back on it?
Pardon me?
If you were doing just fine, why would you go back?
Because it improved me even more. I was doing fine.
He
But
was,
it improved me even
probably,
more.
I can qualify that. I would say he was probably, his COPD was close to 95% better.
I would say 90 to 95.
90 to 95. His bronchiectasis was maybe 92%.
That's probably,
Okay, dealing with a little bit of things from cardiovascular stuff, blood pressure was kind of bouncing around a little bit, but that, he was off all of his blood pressure medicines, that's like 95%. So they were saying, well,
Yeah.
you got a little time left on your program, let's see if we can get you up, get it even better.
Now, I'm
So-
off it again. They took me off it now for like another month.
Yeah,
Because, you see, with cancer, they have markers in your blood and they can tell how you're doing.
Okay.
With COPD, they gotta rely on what you tell them. Because there's no blood markers, there's no, how you feeling? What's your oxygen? How's your blood pressure? And those are the things that they keep an eye on. So ours is not an exact thing like cancer is. They can't measure it, through a blood test, or scientifically, if you will.
and so like for people that do it for like Parkinson's, they will, because there's no real blood test measurement for that. So they may stop the protocol for 2 weeks. and see what happens to your tremors, what happens to these things. Do they get worse, or are they stabilizing, are they getting better? So that's what Dan was saying, that sometimes you have to do things to see what your symptoms are. Okay, somebody back in here, yes.
Doctor, I hate to ask this question, but I've got to, because you brought up the fact that the typical doctors are, they get kickbacks on this.
I didn't say that, Bernie did.
I did.
Well,
And that's really not really true, but, yeah.
And well, the question being is you don't do this for nothing yourself, and I don't know whether Dan does or not either, but are either of you, how do you benefit through this program?
We get a referral fee.
Okay.
We do get a referral. We wouldn't be standing up here tonight doing this for nothing. You're absolutely right. So we do get a referral fee for that, which is a reasonable compensation for the work that we do.
Okay.
Okay? Yes.
When you talk about the health of improved with the mitochondria, I'm thinking, who would not want to go through this? Who would not be a candidate if you're not symptomatic to any of those conditions? Would you say, well, you're doing pretty well?
No, because I said that, and that's a great question, because they do have some people, particularly in Europe. They got some people in Europe that are high-end professional athletes that are doing this anyways to get the extra 10 or 15% of oxygen capacity and to get a little bit more in terms of duration and stamina. And so I had said that, you know, a lot of people would say, well, I don't have cancer, I don't have non-cancer, and I don't have any of this other. Is there a way I can clean up my mitochondria, clean up my life, and just get better and prevent things from happening in the long run? And the answer to that's yes.
Hashimoto's disease,
Uh-huh.
heart disease,
Yep.
arthritis.
Yep, all those. Particularly rheumatoid. I mean, I have one girl that's got really, oh, she's such a sweet thing. I love this little girl. And she's had a combination of lupus and rheumatoid arthritis since she was 12. And she's 18. And one of the things she learned to do was to learn how to do sign language. But she said her hands hurt so bad she couldn't sign. She had these two big tears that rolled down, big blue eyes, you know. And she said, if I could only do that, because I said, what would it be like if you weren't sick anymore? And she looked down and she said, I've been sick since I'm 12. I don't even know how to answer that question. I've spent my whole life in doctor's offices. And she's like 75, 80% better. And she's about 9 months into the program. Took a while. She didn't see much change in the first 2 or 3 months, not much. Pain got better, a little better, but it's never linear. It's never you start here and you're all of a sudden better. It's better, worse, better, better, worse, better, worse, better, but the trend is in that direction. And now, I mean, she came into the office, this was maybe 6 weeks ago now, with her mom. And her mom came in as the patient, and because I see her mom for other things, and I just yakking away, and suddenly I went, oh my, I didn't even recognize her. I was like, oh my gosh. You know, so yeah, all of those things, because you're here. This is where I'm stretching your take-home message for the night is the whole thing about this is lateral movement across conditions and not vertical silos of the way we've been thinking of it.